So today we're finding and estimating square roots. The square root is the number a is a square root of b if a squared is equal to b. So what does that mean? That means that the square root of 16 would be 4 because 4 squared is equal to 16. Now negative 4 could also be the square root of 16 because negative 4 times negative 4 equals 16. The radical symbol right here indicates a square root. So the square root of 16 means the positive or principal square root of 16, which in this case would be 4. The negative square root of 16 means the negative square root of 16. So this would equal negative 4 because 4 times 4 is 16 and times the negative that is outside of the radical equals negative 4. 16, or the number inside of the square of the radical, is the radicand. Plus or minus is the symbol to indicate both square roots, the positive and the negative. So for example, if you need to find the square root of 64, what would that equal? So the square root of 64 would equal 8 or negative 8. Because 8 times 8 equals 64 and negative 8 times negative 8 equals 64. The negative square root of 100 would equal negative 10. Only negative 10, right? Because the negative is outside of the radical. The positive or negative square root of 9 over 16 would equal the positive or negative square root of 9 over square root of 16. That would equal plus or minus, what's the square root of 9? 3. The square root of 16? 4. So plus or minus 3 over 4. What about the negative square root of 16? The square root of negative 16. That is undefined because no number times itself is equal to negative, right? Negative 4 times negative 4 is positive 16. So this would be, for real numbers, the square root of a negative number is undefined. Some square roots are rational and some are irrational numbers. A rational number means it's a number that is either a whole number or an integer, right? And it means that as a decimal, a rational number either repeats or terminates. An irrational number is a number that cannot be written as a fraction. It's a number that does not repeat and does not terminate. So if we look at the square root, positive or negative square root of 81, what would that equal? Positive or negative 9. See how 9 is a rational number. What would be the negative square root of 1.44? Would be negative 1.2, a rational number. In decimal form, it terminates. What would be the square root of 4 over 9? Would be equal to the square root of 4 over the square root of 9, which means 2 over 9. This number is written as a fraction, and as a decimal, this would be repeating. I'm sorry. 2 over 3, you're correct. Thank you for catching that. And as a fraction, this would be repeating 6. So these are all rational numbers because rational numbers are either whole numbers or decimals that terminate or repeat. Now if we look at what would be irrational, the square root negative 1 over the square root of 7 would be irrational. because this means 1 over the square root of 7. The square root of 7 is a decimal that does not terminate and does not repeat. So this would make it an irrational number. Now, why is negative square root of 5 irrational? Because the negative square root of 5 is a decimal that does not repeat and does not end. Okay, so it's irrational. Same thing for the square root of 1/3. This would be irrational. Irrational numbers cannot be written as fractions. Perfect squares are the squares of integers. So right here in blue ink are consecutive integers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then the consecutive perfect squares. So the square of 1 is 1. The square of 2 is 4. The square of 3 is 9. The square of 4 is 16. The square of 5 is 25, and so on. What's the square of 6? 36. The square of 7? 49. The square of 8? 64, and so forth. So thinking about consecutive integers and their consecutive square roots, we can estimate square roots. So for example, if we have to estimate the square root of 14.52, we can sort of say, well, let's think about it. The square of 1 is 1, the square of 2 is 4, the square of 3 is 9, the square root of 9, the square root is 3, the square root of 4 is what? The square root of 16 is what? 4. Yes or no? So why did I choose these numbers? Because they're the closest numbers. See how these numbers, this is less than 14 and 14.52 is less than 16. So I'm concentrating on the radicand, right? That means that the square root of 14.52 is somewhere in between 9 and 6, right? So we can say the square root of 14.52 is between the square root of 9 and the square root of 16, or is between 3 and 4. Can you check the exact square root in your calculator? And what does it give you? 3.8105117777, and it continues. It's not a perfect square. So is the square root between 3 and 4? Yes.